I'm going to ask Ed Potts from the Talking About Socialism steering group to give a brief report on the latest meeting that we've had in the Forging Communist Unity process. Ed can fill out the background, give a bit of an update, and we'll then open it up and Minnie can ask her question or make her point, and we'll take any other points as well. So Ed, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, well, comrades may have had a chance to see the update. I'll post it in the chat now, just so that people can save the link for later if they haven't seen it already. We've been participating in discussions, a discussion process involving TAS, the TAS steering group, the weekly worker group, the CPGB, and also now the so-called unity faction of the Prometheus Editorial Board. So those comrades among the Prometheus Editorial Board who want to be involved in this process, which is under the banner Forging Communist Unity. There have been a few meetings so far, all online, although it's envisaged that the next meeting will be in person. And they have been tentative to start with, I think, inevitably, because it takes time to work out, of course, what you're going to discuss and how long it's going to take. I don't think anybody expects it to be a quick process, but for our part in TAS, in the TAS steering group, we're optimistic about the potential of the process because it offers the prospect that those organisations which are currently on the left in this country arguing for a mass communist party, not along the undemocratic lines of the revolutionary organisations which exist, such as the SP and the SWP and so on, but a qualitatively different type of organisation. And we think that there's the prospect for all of us who are making very similar arguments about that through a process of hard work and discussion to reach much greater cooperation and ultimately unity of our organisations. We think that should take the form of a new organisation, a new fused pro-party organisation, which has the potential not simply to be bigger than the organisations that we currently have by adding together the quite small number of members that are involved in each, but to be qualitatively different and attract greater numbers of people to it. We hope it's something that people will be enthused by, not least, of course, the people who are in this discussion tonight and people elsewhere who have a similar appetite to see an organisation of that kind emerge. The discussion that took place on Sunday just gone was the first really substantive discussion on the subject of programme, which is really where all it's really the first consideration. Everything starts with the politics for us, and everything flows from the politics, and the programme is what sets out the organisation's fundamental principles and the strategy and how it wants to change the world and what it's going to do in order to effect that change. So it all starts with programme, and it's a big topic. What we did in advance of the meeting was we submitted 2 documents to it, which you can read, which are linked to in the post that I've just posted in the chat. It's on the TAS website, talkingabout.socialism.org. You can find it there. There was a shorter document, which was a sort of agreed position of the TAS steering group. I also submitted a longer article, which goes into some of the arguments in a bit more detail, sets out really my sort of personal view on things, and also begins to make a critique of some of the aspects of the CPGB's draft programme, which they, of course, quite understandably put on the table for discussion as their contribution. There was quite a lot of discussion about it, in particular discussion about what level of agreement or acceptance of the programme is required in order to be a member and what significance that has. I think it's clear from the documents that we submitted that ultimately we do think, as I think everyone present in that meeting thought, that ultimately membership of a communist party or a pro-party organisation should be determined by whether you can accept the programme, because there may well be things in there that you don't agree with, but you think, well, I can live with it, even if it's not quite the way I would put it. But we are making an additional argument, which is especially relevant to the Forging Communist Unity process, which is that it's not enough simply to skip to the end and say, well, look, here's a draft programme, or here's the programme that we have. Would you accept it? And if you would, then the discussion's over. We think that doesn't really cut it. We think that there are a number of organisations with points of unity or programmes or whatever they may be, which we could accept potentially being in if we thought it was important to be in those organisations to pursue a sort of tactical work in there. But that really asks the wrong question. Before we get to the question of, well, what can you live with if you have to? What can you accept? It's necessary to go through a stage before that, which is trying and putting serious effort into working out what we can all agree with. And precisely because we hope to see a new, bigger and better fused organisation emerge from this FCU process, we think one of the key ways to help that and help achieve that is for the organisations involved to put serious effort into collaboratively drafting a new programme which reflects, so far as is possible, the things that those involved agree on before falling back on what we can all accept if agreement isn't possible on any given issue. We think that there's a lot which ends up in programmes and which has ended up in this example in the CPGB's draft programme, which is extraneous to requirements, surplus to requirements. It doesn't belong in a programme. It may be very useful and helpful analysis or commentary, but it doesn't really belong in the programme which we ask members to accept. And so it's an ongoing discussion. Of course, we barely grazed the surface of a lot of this during the time that we had available on Sunday. We will discuss as long as we need to, ultimately, because we think this is an important process. It has a lot of potential, and we're optimistic about it, and we want to get it right. We've published the 2 documents on the TAS website because we think it's important to be open about what we're arguing. And of course, we welcome your views as well, and we'd like to hear what you think, whether we've argued things in the right way, whether you agree or disagree with us, and so that's why we've done that. So I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Ed. I'm going to we don't have a lot of time, and that's inevitably concise and truncated, and it doesn't really begin to even give a flavour of what we discussed. We met for an hour and a half, and really only 4 people were able to contribute significantly to the discussion. Minnie, I'm going to call you in, so fire away.
Thanks, Nick. I'll just be brief. Yeah, I read the documents that have been put online, and I appreciated them. I thought they were good documents, and a lot of them were making me think, especially the position on the petty bourgeoisie under communists coming to power. But one thing that I want to say is the acceptance and agreement thing. So is it the case at this stage that comrades in TAS are the Forging Communist Unity, because there was some sort of difference on the Communist CPGB forum, which is online on video, that the Forging Communist Unity comrades, the steering group, the people leading the process from the organizations, is it that they will, the hope is they can come to an agreement on a program, an agreement, and then when it's put to members, that's when it's an acceptance thing. You can accept it. And also one more point, Jack Conrad did say at the CPGB forum, I think he said any new organisation force would have to have the name CPGB, but isn't the very name Great Britain, the Great, is that not an imperialist signifier? Thanks.
Okay, Minnie, great questions, and these are things that we're going to have to grapple with in the course of the discussions. Lawrence, I'm going to call you in very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly, Nick. I agree with many. I'd like some. I thought the discussion around acceptance and agreement is an important one, and I'd definitely like to hear more about that. And I largely agree with the TASS's position on that particular document. The counter argument that I've heard for keeping that lengthy document, that because of the experience of the Soviet Union, we have to have a really long program. I think that's quite false. We definitely need to talk about the Soviet Union and its failures and that we're not going to follow it. But I don't think you'll solve or win that argument in a program. I think that'll be a much deeper educational theory question. That's it.
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm going to call back Ed in a minute for just 1 minute. I'm just going to put my 2 minutes in. All of these things are up for discussion in the Forging Communist Unity meetings that we have every fortnight. We're going to meet for a whole day in 2 or 3 weeks' time in London. And on Sunday, on yesterday morning, we had Jack Conrad introduced his arguments in favour of the CPGB draft programme for about 25 minutes. Ed spoke from TAS for about the same. Mike McNair then spoke, and I spoke, and that was all we were able to do. Jack came back for a few minutes, and so we've only sort of like begun to touch the outlines of agreement and disagreement. And actually, I'm sorry, Soraya, do you want to come in quickly?
Just very quickly, there's some debate going in, and obviously in the chat, and I'm not suggesting we open that all up, but I do think that the idea that. The idea is we want to build something bigger, and it's not the small groups getting together and becoming a bit bigger. And so the issue of a name is really important, because if people think, if you keep a name like CPGB, people will think it is the Communist Party of Great Britain, and that will not be A, giving the idea that there's something larger, and B, I think it's a whole debate. Names are very, very important, and Great Britain and Brittany, I'm afraid that's a bit of historic false argument. If anybody thinks for 1 second that Great Britain isn't imperialist, I'm afraid I'll be quiet.
Okay, thanks, Soraya. Look, I think the fact that we're trying to get this squashed into 15 minutes is important, but also it's impossible. And even in the discussions and in the document, you can see that it's quite difficult to explain, accept, agree, the question of the name, the question of the history, the question of what theory, and so on. And there are differences clearly that are going to emerge more fully in these debates, but we're taking them very seriously. And we're going to do our best to make sure that the differences don't derail the process. And what we've said, and I think this is agreed by everybody, is we'll take as much time as is necessary, but we also want to move quite quickly. And I think Minnie's point brings home that I think in TAS, we need to have our own discussion, in fact, several discussions, so we can thrash out these points about agree, accept, the name. What do we mean by a new organization? Is it going to be a new organization, or is it going to simply be the adherence of a few to another existing organization? All these things we need to spend time, effort, and energy. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to call Ed back very briefly to say a few things in response, but I think they're going well at the moment, and we'll keep putting in our thoughts. Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Well, I'll just conclude by saying the things that comrades are picking on for the discussion, and what does it mean to say socialist rather than communist? All of these are examples of things which happen in the FCU discussions as well, which is that even people who have a lot of political experience and a lot of reading and training behind them, precisely because we've been divided into rival groups, if you like, reproducing and duplicating a lot of the same work. We've come to develop our own traditions and our own ways of speaking about things. And so it's difficult sometimes to understand what somebody else means, and maybe they use the same term in a different way, or they use a different term to mean the same thing. And that's precisely something that we hope we can overcome and reach a greater understanding of each other's positions. I don't want to get into all of the substantive points, save to say that on things like the name of the organisation, for example, I think everybody involved agrees that it's ultimately secondary what the name of the organisation is. What's really important is what it is and what it does. And the name is something that, you know, comrades may argue very forcefully for what they think is a good name or a bad name, but ultimately it's secondary. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I encourage comrades to read the documents. I think it's clear from those documents that we're certainly not proposing vetoes or consensus politics or anything of that nature, but you be the judges and tell us what you think about them, and look forward to discussing it further.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ed. Comrades can take time, if comrades take the time to look at the documents. Also, the CPGB's online communist forum, Jack Conrad gave a report back yesterday, which comrades may find interesting, and certainly reading both sides may provoke further thought, as they clearly have for those of us that are engaged in the discussion. We do have a sort of statement of our own aims and principles, which are part of the ongoing discussion. If you haven't read that, it is on our website. And I just make this last point. We do want people to join TAS. If you haven't joined TAS, then please send us an email through the website on the contact us page, and we'll get in touch with you and discuss it. Because we think this process is extremely important. We want to get as many people involved as possible. The next meeting of Talking About Socialism is in a fortnight's time. We've got Moshe Makova is going to give his views on the latest developments in the Middle East. I think Moshe is always welcome at these meetings, very popular speaker. The fortnight after that, we've got Owen Miller, who is an academic at SOAS, a specialist in Southeast Asia and particularly in Korea. He's going to do a talk on the recent tumultuous events in Korea. And then we'll be thinking about a new program. And I imagine that the talking about, the forging communist unity process is going to have to feature more regularly, and perhaps give over a lot more time than we've been able to tonight or at the last meeting. With that, I'm going to say thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're new to the meetings, I hope you especially enjoyed it. Please come back, and we'll see you all in a fortnight's time. Good night.